Welcome to another video in the TimCo Retail Manager course. This course focuses on real-world application development. Right now we're working on building out our first section of work, which is the basic register. In this video, we're going to wire up our shopping cart so we can add items to the cart and get a total. Now, if you're a Patreon supporter, the $5 per month level or higher, make sure you head over to get the latest source code. Either way, make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you can follow along. Also note that there's a playlist for this course on my channel. That way you can start from the beginning if you want and make sure you follow it in order. Finally, as you're thinking of suggestions, please leave them down in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts on this course. I've got a running list of suggestions for improvements and they'll definitely make this application better. Let's get started. I have opened the TimCo Retail Manager project and solution. Let's open up the UI and go to our view and let's look for the sales view. So this is the view we're going to modify. And let's actually start this up so we can see what it's doing. But essentially what it's doing is let's take care of that. What it's doing is it's allowing us to see the products but not actually do anything with them. So we have our 10-inch skillet. We can say a quantity of 5. We can't say 5J because it says that's an error, but 5. And that's all it does. What we're going to do today is we're going to allow us to select something, put a quantity in, make sure it's a valid quantity, add that to the cart. It's going to move it over here and then give us a subtotal, tax, and total. So we'll work through most of that, if not all of that. The tax might be a little tricky. You might start off with a basic tax and then work our way up from that, because there has been some suggestions in the comments, which I really like. The idea of item-based tax and the potential for other taxing methods. And that can get really tricky really quickly, but that's good because this is the real world. We want to address the real world, not just kind of skip over it. But for now, let's stop this, close this out, and start addressing these one at a time. Now, in order for us to know if it's a valid quantity or not, we have to know which item is selected. And from that, we need to know if we can enable this add to cart button or not. Because right now it's disabled by default. We want to enable it if a valid product with a valid quantity has been selected. So the first step is identifying what the selected item is. And that becomes really simple. Caliber Micro's got it already set up for us. And this is something that people often get confused by. They say, well, how do I send all this information over to that button? Or how do I, it's simple. You already have it in your view model. We're just going to expose it. Let's come down here. Let's go under products. Doesn't really matter where we put it, but I think it makes sense here. Prop full. And the type is going to be product model. And I'm going to call this selected item. So notice with my private backing field again, we have the underscore and the lowercase or the camel case for our naming. That indicates it's a private backing field. And we use the Pascal case of the actual property. This is what we will be using when we ask for it. So we've got our get, but then in our set, we want to have our I notify a property change. So notify of property change. And this is the selected item. Notice it's singular, not plural. How do we use this? Well, if we go over here to our items, notice I can click it over here and it highlights it over here in my XAML, which is really helpful. So here in the list box, I can say selected item equals binding selected item. Now the naming worked out in an interesting way. Normally I wouldn't call this selected item, except this is the items list, I believe. And it looks like, no, it's maybe products. Let's go look real quick. This is called products. We should say selected product. I thought it was items. Selected product, which means over here we should rename this to be selected product. Control dot to rename that everywhere, which is these two spots. And now selected product. Control dot to rename that everywhere, and that renames it down here. Now what'll happen is every time we select something in this list over here, this items list, it will put that item, that model, into our selected product property. And it does it by default. Every time we change something, I'll put a breakpoint here, and we'll run this. And this is why I say it's really easy, and I hate saying the word easy because I get it can be confusing. But there's not a lot of work to do. That's what I'm talking about. So if I select 10-inch skillet, it goes right to my breakpoint. Notice my mouse, or actually go to value here. 10-inch skillet, the ID, the quantity, the retail price. So it got all that based upon what is selected. If I hit continue and select fluffy bath towels instead, now fluffy bath towels is the product that has been selected. Let's close all that out. That's step one. Now what we need to do is we identify if we can add, if the quantity is a valid quantity. And I think the way I would do that is actually to go over here to the add to cart button and not really worry about the quantity itself, because the selected item is always going to change. And if we're trying to add a range to the quantity box, which is actually a text box, not an integer box, even though it's bound to an integer, it's going to be difficult. But we have this add to cart button. Let's do this. Let's select add to cart, and we have this. It's called add to cart. So over here, I believe we have a can add to cart. We do. And right now it's just set to false. And it says make sure something is selected and make sure there's an item quantity. Thank you, past us. We've told us exactly what to do. And we can do this in one if statement. If, let's do selected product, question mark, and here's why the question mark. What it's going to do is it's going to check to make sure that the product, selected product, is not null. Because when you first load this form, selected product will be null until you select something. So we don't want to check to try and use a property on a null item. That would throw an exception. We don't want that. So we're going to say selected product question mark. That's going to say, hey, if this isn't null, keep going. But if it is null, it's false. Therefore, skip the if. So if selected product question mark dot quantity in stock is greater than or equal to, and what's my quantity? Well, that's right over here. We called it item quantity. So item quantity. So as long as the quantity in stock is greater than or equal to the item quantity, then we can set output equal to true. Meaning, yes, you can enable the can add to cart button. So now you see this in context, this question mark. Hopefully it makes a little more sense. This is a newer C# feature. But instead of saying if selected product is not equal to null and selected product dot quantity in stock is greater than or equal to item quantity, we can do that in one line. Because if we're looking for the quantity in stock, if this is null, then we don't need to check the quantity in stock. We know this is not a true statement. It can only be true if we can check the quantity in stock. Therefore, this will be false. This whole thing will be false if this is null. And that's correct. That's the right way we want to do it. So that makes our lives a little easier, a little quicker. We don't have to do double checks for null. Now, this won't work quite yet because we don't have anything telling can add to cart to look at again or update or refresh. That's what the notify a property change is for. And that's on, well, item quantity. So we can say whenever item quantity changes, check out the can add to cart as well to see if that has now changed. And also on our selected product. Whenever you select a product, check to make sure that, or check to see if we change the value of can add to cart. And the reason why both of these is because you can update the quantity without having anything selected. And you can select an item without updating the quantity. Whoops. So if I update the quantity to 5, nothing happens. It's still disabled. But if I select fluffy bath towels, I now have a button that says add to cart. It's enabled. I can select skillet, same thing. If I say 50, add to cart goes away. Well, why is that true? Well, 10-inch skillets, we only have 10 of them in stock. So if I said 11, I can't add that to cart. But if I said 10, I can add that to cart. So it's intelligent about enabling or disabling this button based upon the quantity. Now we do have a little bug in here. If I say 0, it still says you can add it to cart. If I say -15, I can add that to cart. So let's fix that bug. By coming down here to our check and saying selected product quantity in stock is greater than item quantity. Before all of this, let's make sure that item quantity is greater than 0. So we're going to do a check first to make sure that item quantity is greater than 0. The reason I put it first is because this is an easy check. Therefore, do the easy check first, because if it fails, then we don't have to even look at this. It's a little less work for us to do. We don't have to do a null check. We don't have to access a property inside an object, which, granted, doesn't take a whole lot of time, but it saves you a little bit. So do the easy one first. Now we need to work on the actual add to cart method. What this needs to do is it needs to take the selected item that's selected from the items list and the quantity, and it needs to add that item to the cart. We don't want to take it away from this list, but we may want to think about modifying the quantity. I think I do. But that raises an issue, and that is, where do you put this quantity? So the cart is just called cart. If we come over here to the cart, let's find that in our list right here. It's a binding list of product model. Let's F12 on product model and look. We have quantity in stock, retail price, description, product name, and ID. Where are we going to put the concept of the quantity in cart? We don't have that in this object. Now, there's a couple ways we can go about this, and it really just depends on your approach. One thing we could do is we could add a few more properties here that don't make sense from a database perspective, but that's okay. We could add an integer that's quantity in cart. And then we have both items right kind of in sync with each other. but I'm wondering if that's the best approach, because I'm thinking the next thing I might need to add is a property for cart total, which would be, let's say you have 10 items in your cart. So you're buying widgets and you're buying 10 of them. Each widget costs $5. Well, I could calculate every time $5 times 10 items equals $50 for this product, or I could have a property that just held it for me. I wouldn't have to do that calculation every single time I wanted to recalculate the cart total. Maybe, especially when we talk about taxes, that might be another thing. And there's other things that might go into this product model that kind of means we're going to add more and more properties here. But it is still a valid way of going about it. But there's another way we can do this. Let's open up and pin the Solution Explorer. And let's look at our models, which is actually in the UI library. And this raises the next question. Is it really a library model, or is it a UI model? Well, I think that, yes, we're using it for the UI, but it's really about the data we're going to send back to the API saying, this is what we're buying. Therefore, I think it makes sense to put it in the library. But there's definitely a case we made for putting it in the UI as a UI model. At the end of the day, I don't think there's a wrong choice here. It's more about your architecture and what you feel works best in your situation, or what you're comfortable with. Or, this is the best one, if you have a pattern at your office or your work, follow the pattern. And that's excellent. So I'm going to add a new model here. I'm going to call this cart item model. Make it public. And the first thing it's going to have is going to be a product model called product. And then I'll have my additional properties. Quantity in cart. I think that's it. I think that'll be good for now. So now we come back over here to our sales view model. We need to change the cart from product model to the new cart item model, which also means we need to change the full property, not just the backing field. And then we need to look for anything else that used that, which I think that we're good. However, this is going to change our front end, because the cart right now is going to be set up to display, well, actually, it doesn't even have this list box item template for the cart. Therefore, we didn't need to change anything. So let's paste it in. But instead of product name, since we're binding on the cart, we need to actually look at the item inside here, which is actually product, which should be product underscore product name. I believe is how that's going to work. We're going to find out in just a minute. I don't always remember all the conventions. So now we have our cart items. We can come back to our, well, let's find it here. The add to cart method. There it is. Just skipped right over it. And now what we'll need to do is create a new model, the cart item model. Now, this is one of those times where we're actually going to use the new keyword instead of using our dependency injection. We could use dependency injection, but I don't think it makes sense here. Therefore, cart item model, let's say item, equals new cart item model. And in fact, we can just do our curly brace instead and say product equals selected product, and the quantity in cart equals the item quantity. And now we can add this to our cart. So cart dot add item. And that should add it to our list. Let's run this. Skillet. Let's put 5 of them in the cart. And it says, hey, you can't do that. So a selected product is valid, item quantity is valid, but cart is null. Well, the reason for that is because we never initialized our binding list. So with our products, we initialize our binding list right here. We never do the same thing with cart. Let's come down here and say equals new binding list. We can do that right in the private backing field. Let's run this again. I'm gonna get tired of typing this password real quick. I may show you a trick on how to fix that. Add to cart, and it added, kind of, but nothing's being shown. Okay, you can see it, nothing's being shown here. So it looks like our binding isn't quite right. I think the issue has to do with this over here, this product name or product underscore product name. I don't believe they enabled the dot syntax in binding, but just in case they did, I'm going to try it. There's been about 3 different iterations of the way to do this in Calibre and Micro, and since I've done it for so long, I often get confused as to which way is the correct way. 10-inch skillet, 5. Add to cart. Hey, look at that. They did add the dot syntax. That's cool. So now I can add 5 hard repair kits, which we'll probably need to do something here with this display because it's not showing off the quantity here. And it's actually a way of doing that makes our lives a little easier. We don't need to use the dot syntax. That is if we go over to our cart item model, we can create a property here, public string. Let's call this the display text. I guess is probably the best way of saying it. Have a getter, and we're going to return the value of string interpolation, and let's say product name, like so, and then in parens, we'll put our product. Nope, we're gonna put our quantity in cart, like so. And then we'll use display text instead of product name, which means that messing this up, while informative, it helped us figure out what's going on here. We can actually undo that by just doing display text instead. And now it should be that when we run this, that it says the correct value. I think I've typed that wrong. Okay, so quantity of 7 for 10-inch skillet. And there we go. So now I can see, notice we can't add 7 large toaster ovens because I believe there's only a couple in stock. There's 2, there's 3, there's 5, not 6. So let's just add 1. And you could probably even omit the 1 if it's just 1. But if we have more than 1, we can add the parens. That'd be kind of a cool feature. Not something you need to do right now, but it might be a nice visual addition. All right, let's stop this. And now let's look at the next step, which is we're just going to start some simple calculations. We're not going full tilt with tax yet because we haven't addressed the idea of individual item taxation. And that's something we need to address. But we can at least do subtotal so we have a pattern down. Let's go to our sales view model and look for subtotal. So we need a calculation here. We have the cart items. So we can do a calculation right here that says, let's just do an output. This is a string. Let's create a double or a decimal first. Decimal. And let's call this the subtotal equals 0 to start with. And then we'll do a for each. For each, we can say var item in cart. For each item in cart. That makes sense. I actually like it. Item dot product dot retail price times item dot quantity, I believe it is. And it's like me because we need to do subtotal plus equals, and the retail price is a decimal. That's good. Times item dot quantity in cart. And that gives us we can put this parens. It's not strictly necessary, but I prefer it that way. So you can visually see that this work gets done first, and then we add that to the subtotal. So that's going to loop through every item in the cart. And once we're done, we can print out the subtotal. Now to actually output this, we can say subtotal to string. And then in the to string, we have the option of passing in a format provider or a format. I'm going to pass in a capital C. That's going to convert it to a currency. Now we do need to call the notify a property change on this whenever we add something to the cart. So that is right down here, add to cart. So we call the notify of property change on the subtotal. And we should do the same thing with the remove from cart, which we're not calling yet, but we still should put it in there for completion's sake. Now if we run this, it should be actually get our subtotals to work. So our 10-inch skillet, let's put 4 of those in the cart. That's a subtotal of $75. Fluffy bath towels, let's get, 15 of those. That's $524.25. And 1 large toaster oven. And there we go. Now, we're not updating these quantities when we add them to cart. We're not setting the quantity back to 0 or 1. And notice that, let's just say I have 1 large toaster oven in the cart already. If I say 5 and add to cart, and 5, I can add 11 total to the cart. But yet if I say, 11 here, it says, no, you only have 5 in stock. So there's a bug we need to fix. So let's address that. But the subtotal does work, which is good. So the bug is kind of a two-parter. First of all, we're not modifying the quantity available based upon what we've already added to the cart. And I think that's the best approach, is to actually modify those numbers. So when we hit add to cart, let's go to the add to cart here. And we add this item to the cart. What we should do is then say that the selected product dot quantity in stock minus equals item quantity. Now here we can also set our item quantity equal to 1. That way it resets back to 1 instead of keeping that same number. We can set it to 0, but I think 1's more appropriate. And right now we're defaulting to 0, which we should probably change as well. So let's do that. Let's find the item quantity and set it to 1 by default. There we go. Since it didn't have a default value, it defaulted to a default int, which is 0. So now we have the add to cart is then decrementing the quantity in stock by the amount we've added to our cart. That's kind of step 1. But then the other part of it is that you can add something to the cart and say, I want to add 3 of them, and I want to add 2 more, and it creates 2 different lines instead of just updating the quantity to 5. That one's a little trickier, but I think we can do it. We'll need to do a little bit more work in this add to cart here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to look at this cart and say, is there a item that has a matching product? And we can actually do just a direct comparison to the product because of the fact that it's the same object. So let's do this. Let's just create a cart item, which is a cart item model. So cart item model, let's call it existing item equals cart dot where, or we can say dot first, I believe. Yes, first, and then say our lambda expression x dot, or actually x equals, product equals selected product. This will do a comparison of the actual objects, which normally you don't do because they have to be the exact same object, not the exact same values. Now, if they're the exact same object, they'll have the same values, but the two aren't the same. If I create a new object in variable A and say the first name is Tim, last name is Corey, I create a variable in variable B that's the same type of object with a first name of Tim, last name Corey. Those two are not equivalent. If you just say, does A equal B? The answer is no. But if I say in variable A, if I say first name is Tim, last name is Corey, in variable B I say put A, then B and A will be the same thing. So remember, it helps remember that this is a memory address essentially. So if you both have the same exact address, then you're talking about the same house. If the two houses look the same, but they're at different addresses, they're not the same. So that's the difference here. So we're getting the first item, which that returns and puts in our existing item model the first it finds matching. Now, here is the deal. It's going to return the first, but it's going to say a argument null exception. I believe there's a first or default. There is. So the first default is a little better because what it's going to do is it's going to put the cart item model into existing item if it finds one, the first one. But if it doesn't find any, it's going to put the default value for an object, which is null, into this. How does it help us? What we can do is we can have an if statement. If existing item is not equal to null. And then we can do some work on it. So that work would be to say existing item dot quantity in cart plus equals item quantity. Basically, if you already have 3 in the cart and I'm adding 2 more, add those 2 to your existing 3. Now I still need to do our selected product and subtract that value. So that needs to happen either way. And maybe we'll pull us out of the if statement entirely. That might be a better option to keep it a little more dry. We'll have an else statement here. And the else statement is going to do this. I think I will keep that outside, which means I don't need to have it here. So now in theory, what's going to happen is we're either going to update the quantity in cart of the existing item, which don't forget, that's a memory address. That's just the address of the object. Therefore, if we make a modification, it makes it in the list it's already in, the cart. Now you will have to do a notify of property change, so we'll need to take care of that. I believe, I don't believe the binding list looks at properties. With that being said, I think everything else is correct. So if there's an existing item, then update the quantity. If there's not an existing item, create a new one and add to the cart. Either way, modify selected items or selected products quantity in stock and set the item quantity to 1, notify a property change for the subtotal, and then we'll have to do the same thing for probably the cart. I believe this should work. And now, if we run this, we should see, hopefully, the fact we can add to our existing items. So 10-inch skillet, let's add 2. And now let's add, notice it went back to 1. Let's add 5 more. And it twitched and the number changed, but it didn't actually modify this list item. Okay, so let's find out why. Well, I think the issue is that this notify property change in the cart itself, it's saying, yeah, all the same objects are there, therefore we don't need to refresh. But the same objects aren't there. I mean, yes, they are still there, but what has happened is we've modified an object. But because it's a property, not the actual object, the notify of property change we get from the binding list doesn't really care. It says, I don't care. I still won't show you a new value. I'm thinking I might have a hack for this, and there's probably a better way to do it as well. And I think I'm not coming up with a great way of doing it yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a hack in place and see if it works. And if it does, I'm going to leave it and we're going to come back to it. Because I want to do it right, but this way I think should work. So cart.remove existing item. So remove it from the cart. Then cart.add existing item. Basically remove it and put it back in. Let's run that. Let's log in yet again. Ten-inch skillet. Let's add 2. That's $37.50. Let's add 5. That's 7. That's $131.25. So that did work. Now you can add a home repair kit, a fluffy bath towel, and a large toaster oven. But then say, you know what? Fluffy bath towels, we need a bunch of those. Let's get 6 more. And now we have 7 in the cart. So it does work. It's not the prettiest code in the world because we're removing it and adding it back in order to kind of trick the system into refreshing that list. It's not ideal, but it might be the solution we go with. There's one other I want to try just in case. And that's actually looking at notify of property change that's nested. So let's temporarily comment these 2 lines out. This is our hack. I might even want to say it's a hack. So like so. I put 4 slashes here because when I uncomment this, now the hack is still commented. And now I've commented all 3. So just so you know, that's why I did that. And the reason I did comment this twice then, instead of just saying, well, just select these 2, is because this hack goes with these 2 lines that are now commented out. Therefore, everything's commented out, including the comment. What I could do, let's try this. Notify of property change. And let's say we want to modify this to say, can I do existing item dot and look for our display text? Would that even work? I don't think so. Because it's saying, no, that's not right because you're passing a variable. That's not one of our options here. So we could say cart dot. We could probably find it, but I don't think that's going to trigger it properly. Oops. Missed my equals. Maybe it will work then. Existing item dot display text. It's not yelling at me. Doesn't mean it's going to work, but it's not yelling at me. Let's make it blow up. This is part of programming, is you try something else. Ten-inch skillet, add to cart. Let's add 5 more. It did not refresh, but it did update the subtotal. So that didn't work. And I think the reason why is because existing item is not a property. And therefore, it's not actually triggering on the right thing. It should trigger on the cart and refreshing that. So that's not correct. So we're going to come back to that. I'm going to leave the hack in place because it does work and it's not horrible. I mean, it's not like this is the end of the world or something. We're just removing from the cart and adding it back in. And while it does move it to the bottom of the list, we could reorder that list. And in reality, you might see that anyways because the last item you modified is the one at the bottom. And it kind of makes sense. So it's not horrible. Okay, that's what I'm saying. But at the end of the day, I am kind of tricking the system into working, and that's not what we want to do in the long run. But, and I keep telling people this a lot, the most important thing at the end of the day is, does your application work? That's the mark of a good application. Now, could it be horrible code that you should never do? Yeah, it could be. But if it's working, you've at least got the minimum bar for an application. I have seen a lot of pretty programs, and I've written a lot of pretty programs that never actually get to the launch stage because there was so much focus done on getting it right and focusing on that you lost focus of the goal. The goal is to get a working application, which is what we have right now. So that's where we're going to stop. We've got the quantity working, the add to cart working. We have the cart being refreshed and have multiple items in here, and even taking the quantities down on these items so that you can't add more than the total. We've got combining working. We've got subtotal working. I think that's a good stopping point at this point. Now, before we go any further, and this is something I don't often do, I forget. I forget until after I hit stop in the video, and then I'm like, oh, I should have done that. Let's stage these, and let's create a commit. So the commit be something like get add to cart working. Something like that. Commit the stage, and let me go to sync. And we can fetch to make sure there's nothing on the server. There's not. So we'll go ahead and hit push, and that pushes our changes back up to GitHub. So that's it. So now we committed our code. This is a point in time commit. We can kind of come back to this and look at what we did and see just those changes, and if we needed to roll back the changes. So with that, the next lesson, I think what we'll do is we'll address this tax issue, because that's going to be a little bit more complicated if we do per item taxing. We're going to need to modify the database where we're storing them. We need to modify the API that's passing the data through, and of course the models with that. And then modify on this end, capturing that data. And then finally, we can modify the actual calculations for tax. Once we get that though, we can do total as well. And then we can have this full cart experience. We can also wire up then that removed from cart as well. That's a minor thing. And after that, we can start with the checkout and actually send data back to the API and say, this person just purchased this amount. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you got a lot out of it. Please let me know if you have any suggestions in the comments down below. Hey, if you got an idea for how to refresh that list and get that to work, let me know. I'm going to kind of think about it. One of the things that is beneficial, I found beneficial, is you walk away. If you're really banging your head against the wall, walk away and try to even think about it. And then when you come back, it's often easier. You might find a fix a lot faster. Maybe not, but do come back to it. The key to being a great developer is not having a ton of memorized code or knowing every in and out of a coding system. The key to being a great developer is, first of all, to be really detail-oriented. Because if you miss simple things, and I say simple, I mean little things, like casing or small stuff like that can really throw you off and it can make your life miserable. So detail-oriented is important, although that can be learned. Trust me, I know, because in my normal life, my day-to-day life, I'm not detail-oriented. But when it comes to writing code, I've trained myself to be, mostly. I still forget stuff. But the other thing is persistence. If you have a problem and you can't figure it out, don't give up. Don't just throw your hands in the air and say, I can't do this. The key to a good programmer, a good developer, is they say, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to keep pushing. And that doesn't just mean, putting a question on Stack Overflow, even though that can be a solution. The internet is a large place. Look for solutions. And don't just say, tell everyone else, fix my problem for me. Give it a shot. Try it. And by that, I mean spend hours on it. Be persistent, because you won't always find the solution on the internet, even though it is a huge place. All right. Hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely come back for the next one when we address the next piece of it and we can wrap up this sales page and move on to even more fun pages. Thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.